All right. We're going to go ahead and get started, everybody. Brian, thank you for joining me today. We're going to be going over what project leaders need to know before they start adopting AI in any of their workflows or businesses. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Kendall. Pleasure to be here. I'm Brian Coleman. I'm the Director of AI Emerging Technology and MarTech for Beta Rudder. We're a full-service B2B and marketing agency in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've been here for about 15 years, always at the intersection of technology, marketing, and data.
Awesome. And I'm Kendall. I'm the marketing lead here at Workzone, and I am a one-person team. So AI becomes really important when you're a one-person team to really make that productivity go so much farther. And it's great in a lot of ways, but it can also be dangerous in a lot of ways. So when we're talking about AI, Brian, like when people are asking, can we use AI for this? What is the first thing that they should be touching on?
Yeah, Kendall, that's a great question, and I look at it this way: and 99% of the conversations I have start with AI as the preferred solution, but not quite that amount ends with AI being the right solution. So I think when you try and put it in perspective, you have to really think about what problem you're trying to solve. And AI is a powerful tool, but it's not a panacea. It's not a one size fits all for every application. So what we try and do is go through a bit of a waterfall. We absolutely have to identify the problem and then look at the solution. Is the solution an AI relevant solution, or is there other technology that we can layer in, or is it people in process that needs to change to solve the problem? If it is deemed technology, then it comes to an AI, not AI kind of fork in the road. Then we go through, if it is AI related, do we have it in our stack currently? Do we go out and try and buy it if we don't have it currently? And if neither of those are an option, then we go ahead and we build. And we build and can build scalable enterprise hardened tools. And the example I like to give in this framework is that I had a conversation with a teammate, and we sat down and we started to think about the solution, not from a AI, not AI perspective, but truly what was the friction we were trying to solve for. We mapped out the entire role, the entire job description, if you will, and realized that honestly, AI wasn't really the solution we needed to go with. We were able to generate some Python script and run a little automated workflow with no AI involved. And that resulted from somebody having to do a task 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week, roughly, down to the automated workflow, doing it in 10 seconds. And then they were able to do more of the judgment call and the review, or will be able to do that versus the way they used to do it. So if you wouldn't have been thinking holistically, you would have spent a lot of time and energy developing an AI solution that is absolutely unnecessary for that particular environment.
So when people are trying to decide what they're going to use AI for, like what are some like good and bad examples? So like these are the situations where it's going to help a lot, and these are the situations where it's not.
Yeah, I look at it a little more as not so much good and bad, but more so helpful versus not so helpful. So I think the low hanging fruit of synthesizing documentation, doing competitive analysis, helping you build out briefs and things like that. Great use case, right? But the more you start to build complexity into that conversation, the more difficult it becomes to keep accuracy and governance in check. So there's great use cases of using AI for autonomous agents, for example, but you got to be really careful about how you deploy those. So it's not like good, bad to me, because AI can solve and do relatively well in many different instances. It really comes down to, I think, more or less the quality of the output and the complexity of the output under your environment, how comfortable you are working with the tools. Here at Beta Rudder, we run the gamut. We've got people using AI in the most simple transcription, note-taking, research roles, all the way up through creating creative images and video, all the way up to running new business documentation, working within spreadsheets and PowerPoint and building multi-agent systems. So yeah, I could say that all of those could be good. All of those could be challenging. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
No, that's a really good point. And I think it brings us well into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is like, how do you decide what's hype and like what will help? Because I feel like there's so many platforms out there right now that are adding AI onto everything, and maybe they're not doing it particularly well, or they're not doing the like governance and security that needs to be done to keep you safe while you're using that tool. So how do you decide what is hype and what's not?
Well, I think in general, 99% of what you're going to see on LinkedIn and from the vendors, you have to take with a grain of salt that there's a lot of hype built around it. And we purposefully put ourselves in a position of a more practitioner-based pragmatism, right? In that one of the unique things about my role is that I get to interact with our entire tech stack, not just AI, everything. So you learn really quick that the rules and the salesmanship have really applied here as well as the tech landscape across the board. So when I start to see these amazing claims of efficiency or these no code, low code, just plug it in and go, that signals hype across the board. The pragmatist in me and in the organization lays the foundation for AI to be treated like any other tool. You have to evaluate it. How does it fit in your organization? How are you going to adopt it? What is it actually going to achieve for you, and is it necessary? So I think the things you have listed here of hype versus help are really well defined. If you have to really dig to find the true answer and the vendor can't give you straight answers on what they actually can do and what their architecture is, that's usually a layer of vaporware and hype that is just baited out. It's not really real to the extent of commercialization. So you have to have the right strategies, you have to have the right layer of skepticism, and you have to put the vendors through their paces. And I think we'll talk about it a little later, but there are 5 tests that we run on every vendor that we talk to. And if they can't pass those tests, to me, it's bolted on and hyped up, and it's not worth bringing into our organization.
So that makes complete sense. But, you know, with leadership and also being leaders ourselves, I think it's really tempting to get caught up in that hype. So when your executive team comes to you and they say, if we get this tool, if we get this AI, it will solve literally all of our problems and we need to do it tomorrow. Like, I feel like there's a lot of teams facing that pressure right now where they want to do it well, but they're also facing this downward momentum basically from executive leadership that's saying, you know, more, faster, we need to get on it today.
Yeah, there is definitely tension in leadership teams to the practitioners that needs to be addressed. And the way, I guess the way I look at it is this, kudos for them coming into the conversation with a wide open view of what's possible. When all you're fed is the hype cycle 24 hours a day, and you see other organizations standing these things up, you naturally are going to lean into that. You get excited about it. But in organizations like ours, where you have practitioners that are very much down the middle on use case and just the black and white of it, that conversation becomes really, really important. So the subtext to that is organizations that have put rigor behind their tech investment or their AI investment should have a pretty good foundation of how to handle those conversations, because there has to be an other side to the discussion to at least be the devil's advocate in what's possible. We had a conversation the other day where a tool came across my desk, looked good on the surface, dug deep into how the tool works and how it operates, and it wasn't right for our organization. If there's nobody that's watching the watchers in that respect, investments are made erroneously or dangerously within an organization. So the guidance I give any organization I talk to is make somebody's job the transparent layer to the discussion that can present the case back unbiased. Here are the facts. Here's how it works. This is the risk. And then start to peel those layers back to determine exactly what value that hyped up solution brings to your organization.
Yeah, and I think it's just so hard because we, especially as marketers, want to perform better. We want to do more. There's always more things to do in a day than there is time. And so I think AI can be really tempting from that standpoint. But if, like you said, you're not doing the due diligence, like what are you signing up for on the back end that might get you in trouble later? So
yeah, and there's a term for it. You can call it the AI carve out. You can call it AI exceptionalism. There's this theory that if you throw AI in front of something, no matter what it is, it becomes magic, and it becomes so important to bring in because that's the echo chamber we're all living in right now. So I advocate quite a bit for cross-team collaboration between IT, marketing, other functions that are using these tools to sit down and really have a hard conversation about what the risk profile is, what the use case is, how your data is going to be handled. There's a lot of nuance that doesn't get expressed when you're reading the PR headline that needs to be taken into consideration. And just because it's AI, those rules don't change. So I think if you've got a really sound practice in your organization with a good IT team and a good leadership team, those conversations are less about the hype and more about the, hey, I saw this, what do you think? And we've got that working here, I think, in a lot of ways that I get pinged more on the, I saw this, let's evaluate it, than, holy cow, somebody else is doing it, we have to do it. And then they make the investment without doing their due diligence.
yeah, and I think that goes well into how adopting AI isn't going to fix things that are already broken. And I think that is one of the biggest temptations across the board, whether you're leadership or not, is that it will come in and do all the things you don't want to do so you can focus on other things. But when a team adopts AI to fix that broken workflow, what are they actually doing to themselves?
Do you mean specifically what are they doing in the steps, or what's their true intent?
I mean, what is their true intent? Like when they implement it and it starts to break down, like why does it start to break down?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. I am a strong believer that there is no AI strategy without a good data strategy. So let's unpack that one first. In an environment where AI sits over your data, and what is AI in a lot of ways, simplest way to think about it is math over some layer of data. It's like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't have a really strong governance and strategic map for your data, AI will break. Or more specifically, and I think you're alluding to this, it'll give you a hyper confident answer over bad information. So the shift is, yeah, that seems right, but the underlying foundation was wrong. So the wrong becomes pushed forward, right? So without that strong data format and governance, you're going to find issues right out of the gate. I think the other part of the conversation is that technology has a law of diminishing returns. So we bring in technology like AI and we set it up and we start to run it, but we aren't looking at the people and the process that sits behind the tools that are being used. So it's just like the data conversation. If you've got wrong people in wrong seats or a lengthy broken process, I have not seen an environment where AI just comes in and magically mops that up, because it's predictive over pattern matching in a lot of ways. So it's taking whatever you give it and trying to match up a response and an action and a path forward. Well, if you're 37 steps deep into a workflow, and this will, I'm sure your audience will appreciate this, if you've got a project plan that's 37 steps when it could really be 5 steps, laying AI over the top isn't necessarily going to fix that problem. So I look at that part of the equation more like the triad of people, process, and tech, and we evaluate all three. Going back to that example I gave with the automation, that wasn't a tech solve as much as it was a people and process conversation. So we mapped it with the process and the people above the line, and we mapped the tech underneath it so that we had a really clear distinction of where the friction was. And I think if you're just laying tech over the top of anything, it's like a Band-Aid over a deep cut. Maybe it heals, maybe it doesn't. You may need stitches. So I think having a full transparent view of your entire process is critical. And then, and with, have a good data strategy, and you'll have much better results. Those two things missing, I think the whole chain breaks.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I've mostly worked at startups, and I think especially in startups, like AI is a very big temptation because it's always small, lean teams. And this is the smallest and leanest team I've been on, where it's just me. And so when I started implementing AI in my workflow as a marketer, and I didn't have a process, I was like, it's fine, I'll just get started, I'll figure out the process. And really all that did was make everything take twice as long, because AI doesn't do the process for you. And in fact, I feel like we'll actually convolute any process if you try to give it something that isn't clearly defined. And I think that it was a surprise to me. Like you said, I think everybody thinks it's magic, right? It's going to solve all your problems. But I didn't have any processes set up for like what I want my brand voice to sound like in blog posts, or what I want my webinar promotion timeline to look like. And so when I went to AI and I tried to get it to help me to organize all this stuff without any of that process or direction or SOPs or anything, it really just failed miserably. So, and it would have been better if I started the process to begin with and taken less time. So
I love that admission, because I think in a lot of instances, when we put the KPI in place of efficiency, we're looking at it only one side of the coin. So we're thinking about the efficiency of the input. Well, this did X for me faster. You've identified the other side of the coin that often gets missed, and that is the 37 rounds of iteration and hallucinations and false starts that you had to go back and do anyway. So when we think about human in the loop and how critical that is, we try and take the approach, and I don't care if it's AI plus human, human plus AI. I mean, sometimes you will have it draft for you before you write. I try to advocate more of that human start, AI finish, but it has to be purposeful in its execution. And you identified the right things to do. You have to set your tone of voice. You have to give the models in the frontier space, you have to give them context and backstory and all of the things that you would do to maybe onboard a new employee. You kind of have to treat the AI model the same way. That's why I'm such a big fan, and I don't want to get into all the different models, but I'm a big fan of Claude for that reason, because it gives you a lot of that power and it puts it in a place of support instead of you supporting it. So the relationship you have with the model has to be very much similar to how you would interact with a human being, because context is important, accuracy is important, guidance is important. And then being skeptical and a bit of review oriented and judgment oriented makes a big difference. And I see it too often where you can tell someone just ran something through a model and grabbed it and dumped it in, because we all kind of know the tells, right? Yeah. That has to shift. That has to shift, because if you don't take it seriously, you end up damaging your brand, you damage your reputation, and it just hurts your credibility in general. So we take a very human first approach to AI here on top of our pragmatic approach, and I think it serves us really well.
Yeah. I'm a pretty heavy Claude user too, and I joke with my husband that like Claude is my only coworker and my best friend because he's all I talk to all day.
Yeah, well, there's a nuance there. I think it's I said I wouldn't necessarily get into the different models, but I think there's a reason why. I mean, it's very purposefully built for business, and because they have the ability to run markdown files and have connectors, and they've got a very deep MCP library, it becomes an easier tool to integrate and treat in the right way, because you can connect everything, plumb it all together, but it gives you a lot of opportunity to guide and to set the tone with your outputs instead of just guessing and winging and hallucinating all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings us into like where AI does well, right? And for me, it does save a lot of time on those tedious tasks. Like when I will also say that you have to still give it those guidelines and have the processes first, right? Because if I don't know what my brand voice is going to be, no matter how many prompts I give it to help me with a blog post, it's not going to matter. So
Right.
I think for things like that, that's where it wins for me. Where have you seen it win on teams?
I think you've outlined a few of those areas. Disparate information being synthesized into common language, great use case. Transcriptions, great use case. Writing with guidance can be really, really powerful. Competitive research, doing automated tasks. It depends on how deep into the workflow you want to get. I look at kind of a tiered approach, right? There's that surface frontier layer that everybody's using, the Geminis and the Perplexities of the world. There's just a lot of power in research and documentation and doing those kind of rote lower value tasks that you can get done faster by having the models do the work. If you kind of go a layer below and you start building agents, now the tasks become more purposeful in a lot of ways. They're still not autonomous, but you got the opportunity to have work done on your behalf. So like a co-work or a custom GPT or a Claude project, they're everything from creating decks to creating imagery, pressure testing ideas, finding white space, having those agents organize and interact with your files. Those are all pertinent use cases. And I think you've got it. It's the time sinks, the blind spots. The shiny stuff in a lot of ways in today's market becomes the agentic, that fully autonomous. And there's a risk and a reward there. The risk is you're giving full access to your system. It gets really expensive. You need guardrails. But the reward can be either even deeper integration, where you can not only transform work in a vertical that you work in, your function, but you can use automated tasks to move work from one step of the process to the next. And if you think about MCP and some of these other areas, the model context protocol, you can start to build plumbing with your systems and use AI as the orchestration layer. So it's not, again, a one size fits all. There's depth to complexity and depth to what the task can be, what tasks can be achieved. So I think anybody that's using a ChatGPT or a Claude or Perplexity or a Gemini, yeah, there's relevant time savings and accelerations there. But as you start to step down or step up into the more complex workflows, you can do some pretty amazing tasks with the right framework. And then it's not so much shiny because you've worked the process, right? You've identified the problem, you've determined technology is the way to solve it, you've talked to your people. You've got a foundationally achievable task on your hands there, and the technology is there to meet it. So I think the way you've laid it out, maybe minus the shiny stuff in focus, is perfect.
Yeah, and I know the shiny stuff can be so tempting too. Like I've fallen for it. Because, especially for competitive research, like the scraping AI can do is really nice. But what I've found is that those like APIs change all the time. And so that scrape breaks constantly. And so then I'm spending just as much time like fixing the scrape as I would just actually going in and looking at it myself. So
yeah, there's a lot of rigor that goes into building AI tools. And the one I like to think about the most is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. You see it, right? It's the hype of, oh, you can just throw an AI over all of your data in your SharePoint and it's going to just surface everything you'd ever want. That is so false in actual practice. And I think we'll get into the pressure testing point, but I want to make this point. There's a huge difference between building a prototype that lives locally and you can prove out with a little bit of Python and some APIs works, versus an actual stable all the time 24/7 on tool. And you just indicated one of the biggest things, right? You run locally, a port changes or a URL changes or something breaks and the whole system fails. So taking a very rigorous view of how you build is critical to long-term success. Anybody can vibe code. Not everybody can build a stable, consistent, hardened AI tool that actually gets repeatable results and stays in some sort of cost containment that makes sense for the business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You're right. Anybody can vibe code. Like, I play around in Lovable all the time. I'm not an engineer, like, and
Right.
it makes beautiful things.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I know Lovable also had that security breach a couple of months back where, not all of the pages had security on them, and then you end up with a huge breach. And so,
Right. And don't get me wrong, I love the empowerment that comes with these tools. And I've had this conversation 100 times at the office where we've embedded it for a reason and we've given everybody access and training and understanding so that they can innovate, so they can build little applets if they need it. But there's a difference between doing that and publishing that without guidance and governance, right? So if you want to build a little thing that works on your desktop in a custom GPT, that's one thing. If you want to turn that into a marketable tool or something that's more enterprise level, that's where the hard conversations start. So it's finding the balance between empowerment and governance. And I think obviously governance trumps, but if you're not thinking about it that way, you could open yourself up to some pretty severe risk.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that goes well into pressure testing here because obviously I've shared a bunch of things that I didn't pressure test. Right? So when somebody wants to come in and say, okay, like, is this a good decision for my team? Is this a good decision for our business? Like, what are the things that they should be asking?
I love this question. Well, I'll tell you this, I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but some days I really feel like one because I am the guy that reads all the privacy policies and the terms of service. And I cannot stress this enough. That is like cardinal rule number one for me, that if I am talking to any vendor, and I mean a vendor that isn't even in the AI space. I mean, I did it to Workzone. I said to Ash and to Alex and to you, if your roadmap is coming out, I want to see that roadmap. I need to understand what you are doing in the AI space to ensure we're comfortable, and we are, of course, comfortable with what you're doing so that we can protect ourselves and our clients. So rule number one is always check the details. And if it doesn't feel right, push and push. And then I came up with just 5 really simple tests that you can run to vet the partner. So I'm going to run through them quick, the essence of time, but we can always circle back on it later. So one of them is the pricing page test. If you go on to any vendor's website and you see their pricing and AI isn't integrated in, it's just bolted onto the side as a separate SKU, that usually gives me pause because I want to understand why that is. Why are you setting aside an entire SKU set for AI and how does it integrate into the product properly? The second test is a turn it off test. If I can turn off the AI, if I could take that away and the whole thing doesn't break, then I know it's maybe not integrated as deeply as I would expect it to be, right? And then I start to worry about how they're handling data transfer and governance in that respect. Third test is roadmap. And I pressed you guys on it and I press all of our vendors on it. What does the AI roadmap look like? Is it thoughtful? Is it purposeful? Does it feel relevant to the product? If they can answer yes to that and really give me a good idea of where they're headed and not just throw buzzwords on the table, I feel a lot better. Fourth test is the failure mode. If this thing fails, who's responsible? How do sub-processors work? In an environment like most SaaS, sub-processor would be a ChatGPT or an OpenAI sitting behind your solution. So if the tool breaks, who's on the hook? And then the last one is the governance test. What is the roadmap for security? How is data being treated? What's the retention policy? If you can't answer those simple questions as a vendor coming into our organization, we will absolutely not engage in a relationship with you. And by centralizing those conversations around a particular role, and I know not every organization can do this, but by centralizing it under a role, we have frameworks in place to actually walk through each of those steps. And I get called into those kind of meetings all the time. And I just write up a simple response to what I heard, and 9 times out of 10, it's okay. But 1 out of 10, we're dumping it before it even makes it through the front to a second conversation.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest question is the data part, right? Which, like, we go here, where is this data going that the AI is taking from whatever we're doing? Who's owning that? If there's a breach, like you said, who's going to be responsible for that?
Right. This could be an hour on its own. So we'll boil it down this way, because this is where I spend a lot of my time. And I want to be really clear about something that gets confused in the market a lot. Training on your data and data security are not the same thing. Just because you can toggle off training in a frontier model or on any tool doesn't mean the same as the rules of the internet. So to unpack that a little bit, if you think about any cloud-based service, like even Claude Desktop, etc., anything that you put into that tool leaves your building, goes over to Anthropic, it goes over to OpenAI. Anthropic's got a 30-day data retention policy or longer. Some are 90 days, some are indefinite. Every time the data leaves your shop and sits on someone else's server, you've lost control. So now it's open to human review by the third party. It's open to breach, and it's happened, and you're open to subpoena. You lose all legal control. So that's not established to be a scare tactic. It's framed to be appropriate governance. And when I talk to people and I hear, well, the company said they turned off training data, we're dumping our financials in there, my head almost explodes, because the reality is you just gave up all of your IP to a third-party processor, and you've lost control of that data stream. So how do you mitigate it? Well, in our organization, we built a 3-layer framework, and it's relatively simple to understand. It's open, guarded, and locked. So the open framework would be anything that you would have posted on LinkedIn or had conversation openly on the street corner. You can use any of the models for that. Free, paid, whatever. There's no sensitive data, there's no IP, there's no proprietary information. Go for it. Under the guarded framework, we try and keep everybody, or we do keep everybody, in some level of paid tool, like a Claude Teams or a ChatGPT Business, that has more enterprise data security. However, because the rules of the internet apply, our policy is to redact. Instead of saying the client name, you say my client. Instead of saying the client name, you say client X. You tokenize any sensitive data that you can put a unique code to that you can extract back out later, okay? So we're being very purposeful about what goes into those models at that layer. Now there's a gut check involved that we try and place in the middle of that to say, if you redact, but could still piece it all back together. So you took out, let's say you said, I've got an animal health client, they're in New Jersey, and they work in livestock. Well, the average person could piece together with a little bit of research that company. So if you can't redact to the fullest extent, we move to locked. Locked at our agency is a local machine that sits inside our building off the internet. So it's air gapped completely and has 5 different local loaded models that sit in the background and allow us to run the most sensitive information. Because it's never leaving, it's not going to a third party, it's not being retained anywhere, you can now put in that more sensitive, unredacted information. And the models are big and powerful and can handle those tasks. So I'm not advocating necessarily everybody go out and buy a server to do it, but the rules apply regardless of how you're set up in your infrastructure. So open guarded lock treats us very well. And we take time, we've got a little handout we give and a video, and we talk about it a lot in more organic conversations. But that is really how I would handle those privacy conversations. Be transparent, be ethical, and build yourself a framework that you can answer. And the subtext is it brings IT and marketing together in a beautiful way, because now they're not the team of no. Marketing's got the systems that they can use, and the two together work pretty harmoniously.
Yeah. And so for teams that are in like really compliance heavy industries, does that change at all? Like, is there something even like beyond locked, I guess? Because I would have to imagine in those industries, locked has to be what they use for any HIPAA or financial anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily past locked, but what wraps around that locked changes in terms of data retention. Because that machine lives in your premises, there's still data on a thing somewhere. So the security and the governance around that is important. One of the evaluation steps, because we do work in a lot of regulated industries, is if they're SOC 2 compliant, are they HIPAA compliant? Although not necessarily relevant to our business, the HIPAA side, it shows a layer of respect to the data process that I think is important. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a layer above locked like ultra locked or like vault, but if we think about how we're handling those local data points, the rules still apply. And it's interesting because I get a lot of conversations, well, we use AWS or we use Azure or we use Snowflake. That's great for at rest. But as soon as that deviates or someone's not using that framework, you've now lost control. So what I mean is you could have your whole organization tied down to AWS for certain things, but there's somebody in your organization that's using a free ChatGPT, you've lost control. So you need to have that framework, in my opinion. It's hypercritical that you set it up and continually evaluate it.
Yeah. And I know we've touched on this a little bit, but I think the human review part comes in really, I guess, clutch there, where you have to have that human review, because just like sending an AI out into the wild is not really going to get you the results you want most of the time. So if teams have done all their due diligence on the privacy and security side, like what have you seen prepared teams already have that do well in their AI adoption? And maybe use Beta Rudder as an example. I know you guys use a lot of AI, so.
We do. And you've named the four of the biggest things right here. We've talked about all four of them. You need to have a really good process, and that process isn't just a work process. It's a data process. It's a governance conversation. It's collaborative across the organization. Yes, I do this for my job, but it's not just me. It's a team of people throughout the organization and their functions that are working together to make sure we're all sharing the same information. And that's part of that shared visibility and transparency. And I'm sure there's a lot of organizations on that are kind of internal to their world, but also maybe servicing clients. That is really important as well, right? Because some of our clients have their own AI policies. The visibility doesn't stop at your front door. It's really important that you are interacting with your network of clients, vendors, what have you, to make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. Again, I'll use the subtext to that. If in our world, a client has an AI policy, their policies trump our policies, right? So it's kind of a waterfall effect to say client X is allowing it, won't allow it, whatever. We have to abide by that. And we've gone ahead and we're changing our MSA. We're putting more AI language into it. So everybody is clear and there's a transparent layer that shows when we're using it, when we're not using it, how and why. The accountability part is hypercritical as well. And that's where shadow IT, shadow AI falls into the conversation. Everything needs to have purpose and conversation. And we don't just bring any random tool, as I mentioned, into our organization. It's very purposeful. And we've done L&D sessions, learning development sessions. We've done videos. We've done coffee chats. It's a constant conversation. And one of my favorite things is when that's organically brought to me, because it means it's working. People aren't just going out and doing what they want to do. There's a layer of innovation naturally built into that discussion. And now we can have an open, accountable, and transparent dialogue on what we should do. And the last point here, I will harp this one forever, is that governance. Governance over the data, governance over the tool, and a very strong understanding of what these vendors are doing with your data, with the conversations you're having, and how you can protect your organization. The story that hit the headlines that scares the heck out of a lot of people is the company that threw an autonomous agent into the mix and racked up $500 million in token cost in a month. $500,000.
Wow.
That's no governance. That's no accountability. That's no shared visibility in the mix, right? So yes, that is an outlier horror story, but it proves a very good point with a little bit of hyperbole that when those things aren't in place, just like when you build a project plan and you're missing project owners and deadlines and all of the other things that go into it, you put yourself at such amazing risk. And I, for one, that's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's protecting the agency and our clients while still giving everybody the ability to harness the technologies that we have available in this era.
Yeah. So say you want to adopt AI on your team, you're not sure if you're ready. What are some things people can ask or some processes they can go through that will help them determine if I need more work here, we need more processes here, versus we are ready?
I think you attack that challenge like you would any other business challenge. It's no different. And it goes back to the beginning conversation we had about purpose. What exactly are you trying to do? Will it bring value to your organization? Is it something we need to invest in as far as technology, or is this solvable with our people and process or what we already own? And then you step it from there. I mean, it's kind of in this world now where nobody is immune to AI. It's everywhere, right? It's so ubiquitous that it gets overwhelming. So I think if we step back, we peel away that exceptionalism and treat it like it is. Don't, what do they call it? Anthropomorphize. Don't humanize it. Treat it as a tool, bits and bytes, and have a very pragmatic, grounded conversation about what you're trying to achieve. I think you beat the hype. You've got a higher success rate, and you've got a really strong framework and governance that you can push forward, because you didn't knee-jerk react. You didn't just go out and buy XYZ to solve a problem that you didn't even know you had, or maybe you thought you had and you didn't. So if you're just starting out, you're just hitting the ground, do your research, do your due diligence, write the business case, bring in the right people from IT, marketing, leadership, HR, the CFO or a finance team member, have a co-working group and map it all out. And then you make the right decisions with that framework in place around the tools, what's safe and purposeful versus risky and hyped. And then you govern that going forward. And I think you got a pretty good roadmap there.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things I've heard as you're talking is that essentially you're creating a culture around AI, right, at your own company. And I think that's what sets you up for success, is like nobody questions like, hey, can I adopt this? They already know the process that they have to go through. I think that's really, really key.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't bring in a brand new CRM or a brand new product management tool or a brand new digital asset management tool and not do the same thing. Why is AI any different? You would vet it. You would make sure it's the right partner, does the right things, it's safe, they onboard well, they train well. You'd have conversations about it. Take the exceptionalism away from AI, and it's a tool like any other tool. And I mean that I'm ready to stamp that on foreheads, because in the world I live in, it's really, it's important that people kind of take a beat and don't live in the cycle and the echo chamber, because it'll just keep you from sleeping, and it's not worth it.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So I know we do have time for some questions, and we did have some that came in. So this is the first one. How do you work with your IT and tech departments when they are wanting to partner with marketing, but execs push for more adoption and use? They keep zooming ahead and building things before asking or involving marketing for advice. How do we have conversations with IT leaders that position us as an essential partner without making them see us as a bottleneck?
I think it's a great question because it unpacks the cultural nuances in most organizations where IT is bottlenecked up as the no, and leadership wants to go, and marketing's kind of stuck in the middle because they've maybe had their hand slapped before, but they want to move and have that first mover advantage. Every organization is different, but and this may sound super simple, but I really think it's important to bring leadership together. Bring your IT team together, do a summit with IT and finance and marketing and leadership, bring everyone together, have a very clear point of view, very clear guidance on the discussion, and walk through what you're trying to achieve. Because if it's siloed, if you've got marketing off on an island and IT trying to do that plus a million other things, everybody's just going to get co-pilot and you're just going to be stuck with it and happy with it, right? And that's how a lot of these decisions are made. So I don't advocate that it's just so simple as, well, just call a meeting. But really, the culture in your organization is going to drive how you handle it. But I would take a leap and say, getting an advisory board together, having someone that's deeply knowledgeable, at least deep enough to break through the hype, and bring that group together to put an AI framework together and an AI vision together is the best way I've seen it work. Otherwise, it's just frustration and you get stuck in the middle. And if IT is not aware, they will continue to bottleneck and block you, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because they want you to be compliant and slow down while everybody else wants you to go fast. So I have a here at least, we're not 10,000 employees. I have a really good relationship with our IT team. Got a great relationship with our development team, with our digital and analytics team, our data team. We make it our job to talk and to be able to share ideas freely and to be able to push back on each other. So open communication and transparency with leadership involved is a strong business case there.
Yeah, one of the things I learned when I was in college is treat them like your partner, not like your enemy, right? And I think that can get lost a lot, right? Because you get frustrated and you want to move this project forward and this one person's blocking you, and I think it can get really frustrating. But it's more flies with honey than vinegar, right? So
yeah, there's a mantra that I live by, and it's clear communication, clearly communicated in a non-antagonistic way. And that's my more flies to honey analogy, I suppose, is if you can come with an unbiased, pragmatic view and have a good, solid conversation, listen and hear the other side, but clearly communicate what's best for the organization collectively, I think you're on the right path there.
Yeah. This question is interesting because we've talked a lot about kind of the other side of this, but how do you get a skeptical team to adopt an AI tool instead of quietly going back to their old way of doing things? And I think we've talked a lot here about wanting to adopt a bunch of new AI tools, but I know there's people in the camp where maybe they're struggling to get any team or any leadership to try any AI tool.
It's kind of a loaded question, because in my thought is, okay, so you've been able to successfully do your job at a high level potentially without the need for AI. Maybe that's okay. It's again that exceptionalism conversation where we just have to do it. The whole world is using AI. We have to be right there with them. That's not necessarily the case. It can't be. It can't be blanketly applied over every task in your organization. So, I mean, that's not really an answer as much as it is. First, I would come into it with an empathetic view to say, okay, what's up? I mean, is it a personal opinion, like data centers are, using all the water in the world? Is it an ethical concern? Is it a data and governance concern? But you have to kind of figure out where the road is going together, and then decide. Again, is, not everybody in our agency, for one reason or another, is using AI every day. There are some teams that just don't, and they're highly productive and they do a great job, and that's, to me, that's okay. The teams that need the tool, we have or would find value in them, we have really, really strong conversations about what it is and why and what the rules are. But I wouldn't necessarily put overemphasis on someone who's maybe a little hesitant. I would find out why and then work to get some common ground. And, I don't know that I've seen an organization that's like, no, either you use AI or you're fired. Maybe they're out there, but I think that's kind of a foolish opinion if that's the case, because by that logic, then, if you're not using black pens versus blue pens, then, whatever, the work is still quality work. So got to have that conversation.
Yeah. So just going back to communicating and being transparent, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the most common AI mistake you're seeing teams make right now? I'll tell you, you did already mention it earlier, but definitely just like copy and pasting out of ChatGPT. Like, it is so easy to tell. And especially as a marketer too, like there's those buzzwords that are like fluff, those comparison statements. Like, I know immediately when it frustrates me because that's not how it's supposed to be used, and that's not how it's supposed to be done. And to me, I think it's lazy, and it just contributes to all the AI slop out there that isn't adding anything to the world, basically.
Yeah, to me, it's the yes and. It's that and a lack of respect for the tool. More mistakes happen when things aren't, when the AI tool or any tool in our toolbox isn't respected for the governance and the rules and the conversations that we need to be having. When that breaks down, mistakes happen. And that's where a lot of that work slop comes from. And it's, on a personal side, my wife's a writer, and she has a very healthy appreciation for M dashes, and AI has completely ruined her healthy appreciation for them, and the Oxford comma not being there, etc. So, there are those tells. And to me, the tells come, and you can see it happening when the respect isn't given. And I don't mean that to be so, overt. It's just, when I mean respect, I mean there's a place and a purpose for the tool, like any other part of your tech stack. Just respect it, and you'll get a lot better use out of it and have a lot more credibility when you do bring something to the table that was AI assisted.
I also mourn the death of the M dash. I've always loved M dashes, but like I'll still use them in like my personal work, but I can't put any of that on social because it just screams ChatGPT, even though it's not, even if it's not.
Right. Yep. I purposefully take them out of everything that I write, but if I write it myself or it's AI assisted, either way. But I've built all the rules into the skill sets and stuff to take them out. But again, it doesn't change the fact that work slop is real. It is identifiable, and it to me, the thing I want to impress on a lot of people listening, is the thing that makes us unique is us. It's our judgment, it's our discernment, it's our brain. And there are studies showing that improper or disrespectful use of AI is shrinking your brain. You're losing your agency by just using it as a panacea or a proxy for real thought and judgment. So in that AI plus human conversation, or human plus AI, I should say, it's purposeful that the human comes first, because we are the thing that makes our business unique, not an AI tool. Just like a CRM or a CDP or any other acronym makes your business what it is. It's the people that work there. So we want to protect that. And work slop, those are the kinds of conversations when we find them that we need to root out and maybe reskill or have a conversation about how to respect the technology in a way that actually brings value to your business and doesn't harm your credibility.
Yeah. One more question here. While our executive leadership doesn't say if you don't use AI, you're fired, they are refusing to allow headcount without asking department leads why they need more headcount to support them versus whether AI could fill the gap. We are also a very lean team, and this is a source of frustration. We are implementing AI strategy and it's proving fruitful, but that doesn't mean we aren't still seriously overloaded.
Sure.
Our director has constantly challenged us, and I don't know if there's a way to push back on that effectively.
Boy, that's another culture question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's leadership saying we need the differentiation. It's a hard conversation to have, but I think it is one that can be had when the facts of the matter and the receipts are shown. You know, there's no secret that a lot of these AI layoffs and headcount reductions weren't about AI, they were about other things. And the proof is that a lot of those companies have hired people back. So I think I really feel like there's a metric story there and how your workflow is being processed that needs to be documented. It's not so much that if time is time, there's hours in the day and you need to fill them efficiently, but is AI the one thing that's going to solve that problem? Maybe sometimes yes, maybe sometimes no. But I don't, again, want to be so overt to say, well, you need to do 5 time studies and show them the receipts on what it takes to do a task. But if you can't push back in those types of conversations when it's your career and your livelihood, then I think there's something culturally toxic that needs to be addressed. And that might be, a little over the top to say it like that, but in the same respect, I'd want to have an understanding of why the pressure, why are we putting technology in front of our people when our people built the business, and being able to document the real struggles and challenges and pinpoint the business problems, I think is definitely the way to go here. Be open and transparent about it.
I've talked about this in other webinars too, but I think this is where it becomes really important to kind of like set boundaries and say no, where if they want you to take on another project, you say, okay, well, these are the projects I have in flight. What would you like me to give up in order to do this? To me, putting it back in their court, it gives them some sense of kind of like agency that they are deciding what gets worked on. You're being really upfront, and that's also you saying I'm at capacity, so you need to decide what you want delivered and what can be deprioritized. And I mean, as marketers too, you're always going to be asked to show return on investment, right? So if you can't, I'll go back a little bit. Return on investment plus a business case, right? So you only have so many hours in a day. Your team could get X done if they had one more person. This is the amount that they could get done. This is what we're getting done so far. Look at what we could do if we had one more person. But
yeah, and I think if I can impress one thing as we close, becoming a student of the game is hypercritical to me. And I don't mean you need to carve out hours of the day to understand the AI landscape and how technology works, but there's great podcasts, there's great newsletters, there's great resources from all of the different sources, from OpenAI to Claude to whomever. Take a little time and study up, because I think the easiest way to break the hype and have some of those conversations that are really important to the foundation of your business is to come with an informed point of view that isn't biased or reactionary, but just factual against the culture that you're working in. And I think that's one way to kind of break down some of those barriers and meet them where they are in the discussion with a lot of why and yes ands.
Absolutely. And we're pretty much at time there. So everybody will get a recording of this so you can rewatch it whenever you'd like, as well as the slide deck. I want to thank you, Brian and Beta Rudder, for coming and joining us. This was an amazing conversation to have, and I learned a lot just hearing it. So I really appreciate your perspective coming on here.
Well, thanks, Kendall, and I'm humbled to be here. It was a great time, and if anybody's got questions, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to keep the discussion going.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care, y'all.
day.